Chicago Bears are known for defense and having mediocre quarterbacks, but during the 2017 draft, when the Bears traded up to the number 2 overall pick from number 3, they hoped that would all change when they selected Mitchell Trubisky. But nothing really did change. They ended up then moving on from him after 4 years and selected a new quarterback. So, what went wrong with Mitchell Trubisky? Well, let's find out, and to find out, we must start at the beginning. Mitchell Trubisky was born in Mentor, Ohio, where he would wound up later attending Mentor High. During his high school career, Mitchell Trubisky would play 2 sports. That would be basketball and football. During his sophomore year, he would play both sports, but really is where he excelled was in football. His high school coach said, quote, "We were a very big high school in Ohio, one of the biggest, so not typical to start a sophomore quarterback. His first game he played in was at Cleveland Browns Stadium. To be honest with you, through a touchdown there, we knew he had something pretty special at that point. Then I believe it was a playoff game of his sophomore year. He ended up playing against the eventual state championship team and had a great ball game. So after that, Mitchell Trubisky's sophomore year was concluded. So what did Mitchell Trubisky do his junior year? Well, that would be his last year. He would play high school basketball, where he would then eventually commit to football his senior year. But during his junior year of football, Mitchell Trubisky would lead his team to an 11-2 record, but ultimately losing in the 3rd round of the playoffs. So how did he do his senior year? Well, they would make it to the 3rd round again, but losing in a blowout fashion. During his high school career, Mitchell Trubisky would throw for 6,797 yards, passing or rushing for 1,287 yards, having a total of 98 touchdowns during his high school career. Trubisky would be rated a 4-star quarterback by the 24/7 Sports and ended up committing to North Carolina. Mitchell Trubisky did want to go to his home state team of Ohio State, but ultimately he had to go to North Carolina. So, how did Mitchell Trubisky do in North Carolina? Well, Trubisky enrolled in North Carolina in 2013, where he would sit behind Marquise Williams for 2 years. After Williams graduated, they gave Trubisky to start. So how did he do? He opened the year against 18th-ranked Georgia, where he threw for 156 yards and 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in a loss. Then he started to pick it up, where he threw 2 touchdowns against Illinois, 3 touchdowns against James Madison, and 5 touchdowns against Pitt, and 3 against 12th-ranked FSU in the surprise victory. But that's when everything came to a screeching halt, where he would have his worst game of his career against Virginia Tech, in which he threw for 58 yards, 2 interceptions, and no touchdowns. So how would he rebound? Well, he threw for 2 touchdowns against 16th-ranked Miami in a win, and then 3 touchdowns in a win against Virginia. In a blowout win against Georgia Tech, Trubisky had 1 touchdown in the air, another on the ground in a loss. To Duke, Trubisky threw for 297 yards, 3 touchdowns, but it was a loss. So in the year, Trubisky would throw for 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, so clearly Trubisky showed flashes of what he could do. But why did that lead to him getting drafted number 2 overall? Well, Mitchell Trubisky was a dual-threat quarterback, and you know how those things go in the NFL. If you can run and pass and do it efficiently, teams are going to draft you. So what really made Trubisky a number 2 overall pick? Well, he aced his interview with Ryan Pace, where he showed up in an old beat-up car, and Ryan Pace was like, "That's my quarterback," because he thought no matter how the public opinion, no matter what the opinion was on him, he would drive that car no matter what. So how did the draft go? Well, in the 2017 NFL draft, there were 3 quarterbacks that looked to be taken in the top 10. So how did it go? Well, the Chicago Bears ended up trading 1 spot to snag Mitchell Trubisky, which at the time was a shocking move, as no one expected San Fran to take him. Why did the Bears move up? Because, well, they felt like the team was either going to jump San Fran or San Fran was going to take him. But the reality is, 2 best quarterbacks in the draft went later to Deshaun Watson to the Houston Texans and Patrick Mahomes to the Kansas City Chiefs. The one unfortunate problem with Mitchell Trubisky is he was taken in a draft with 2 quarterbacks that were all pros and possibly even Hall of Famers, but no more for Deshaun Watson after his off-the-field issues. So Mitch Trubisky always had this horrible narrative around him that he's the 3rd best quarterback in the draft, and, well, that he just wasn't the one that should have been taken. And it's unfair to him. He could have maybe had a really good career if it wasn't for those narratives that he had, and maybe he was surrounded in a horrible place in Chicago because the Chicago media was horrible. So let's take a look at his career in the NFL. So Mitchell Trubisky's rookie year was going to be a backup, because the Bears signed Mike Glennon in hope of him being the bridge quarterback for when they would select a quarterback in the draft. And, well, that's what the plan was. Glennon would open the year as a starter before being replaced by Mitchell Trubisky, who would end up playing the rest of the year, where he threw for 2,193 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. During that rookie year, Mitchell Trubisky showed a bunch of flashes that would end up letting them go into the offseason that led the Bears to signing some key pieces. And Ryan Pace opened up the checkbooks, and he hired a new head coach in Matt Nagy, but they also signed Taylor Gabriel to be a speedster in that offense, Trey Burton to be the tight end threat that they have in the Kansas City style offense, and Allen Robinson to be the good route runner that Kansas City has. But they also drafted Anthony Miller and Roquan Smith to be future cornerstones on this offense to replace those veterans that they did pay big money to. So, how did that go? Well, they also made a move before the season started and by training for Khalil Mack. The team was expected to maybe finish second in the NFC North and be okay, but once they signed Khalil Mack, everything changed. The Bears were now playoff contenders and possibly even well favorites in some people's eyes, but in mine, they weren't. So, how did the Bears do in 2018 with Trubisky at the helm? Well, in 14 games played by Trubisky, he threw for 3,223 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 12 picks. His best game of the year did not come against the Rams, who was a good game manager game, but his best game came in the wild card game against Philadelphia. That's for a little bit later. While also Mitchell Trubisky did also rush for 421 yards on the ground. While doing all this, Trubisky led the Bears to a 12-4 record with a division crown. Mitchell Trubisky did have some concerns with his injuries, though, as he did hurt his non-throwing shoulder in a game against the Minnesota Vikings. Wasn't able to play. So, in his first playoff game, Mitchell Trubisky threw for 303 yards and 1 touchdown to 0 interceptions. That stat line may not look the best, but Trubisky played one heck of a game. He held the Bears down the field late in the fourth quarter, where he set them up for a field goal. But what happened became the famous double doink, costing the Bears a playoff victory and possibly changing how the coaches coached and how they trusted Mitchell Trubisky. Because if he got them in the end zone, it could be in a different story. 2019 season, the Bears were favorites to win the division and be a playoff contender once again, but it's not how the season went. The Bears did okay. They were a mediocre team when they went 8-8 and missed the playoffs. Trubisky did have a decent year. Basically had the same amount of stats from last year, except maybe threw a few less interceptions, but less touchdowns as well. He threw for 3,138 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. But what I think really changed how Mitchell Trubisky really was as productive was he didn't start running the ball as much as he did. He quit running it, and he didn't have as much yards on the ground, and he just didn't really add more to the offense with his running game. So, how did the 2020 season go? Well, the Bears did the same thing. They went 8-8 once again, but this time they would make the playoffs. Trubisky this year played in 10 games because of the fact he struggled a lot and was replaced with Nick Foles, who would later then be replaced by Trubisky. During this year, Trubisky threw for 2,055 yards with 16 touchdowns and 8 picks. Once again, only rushing for 195 yards. So if Trubisky isn't rushing, there isn't going to be that much play that can be happening because the bootleg action isn't open. But during the wild card against the Saints, Trubisky looked like he would have a deep shot to Javon Wims, but ultimately Wims would drop the ball in the end zone, and it would just be a horrible night for the Bears. Everything wasn't going their way, and they had plays that could have happened, but luck had it, it didn't happen. Trubisky ended his Bears career with a 199-yard passing performance with 1 touchdown and no picks. During the 2021 offseason, Trubisky would go and sign a 1-year deal with the Bills in hope of being a backup and learning under Brian Daboll and hopefully be a starter somewhere else. So, what happened? Well, Trubisky didn't play much, which wasn't a surprise, but he did get the chance in the 2022 offseason where he signed with the Steelers to be their next quarterback. But he would be on the receiving end of being a bridge quarterback where the Steelers would end up drafting Kenny Pickett to learn behind Trubisky. So, how did the 2022 season go for Trubisky? Well, he would only play in 7 games, throwing for 1,252 yards, while throwing for 4 touchdowns to 5 picks. Trubisky obviously did not have a good year, so that's why Kenny Pickett played for the rest of the year, and Trubisky was waiting for his chance to start. Trubisky did go on record saying that he wished he waited longer in the offseason to be able to pick a team where he wanted to go and maybe get more options, but he jumped on the chance to play for Pittsburgh, and well, he got the same thing Mike Glennon did when he was drafted. So, what was my honest opinion of why Mitchell Trubisky started to struggle after the 2018 season? Well, he quit running the ball. Whether the blame could be placed on him getting scared of running the ball after having multiple shoulder injuries that led him to missing some time, or was it Matt Nagy not scheming his offense around him, or both? Because towards the end of Matt Nagy's coaching career, he quit using the strengths of his quarterbacks. He didn't help make Mitchell Trubisky's life easier by doing bootlegs or rollouts to where Trubisky could use his legs, and he didn't do the same thing with Justin Fields to get him more chances of moving around in the pocket and doing more rushing. So I just feel bad for Mitchell Trubisky, as he was put into historically a bad situation for a quarterback to see with the Chicago Bears. They just never have had one. Last time a quarterback was really good was in the 1960s. So as much as Mitchell Trubisky was a great quarterback for a year, a bunch is just left up in the air of how good he could have been if he continued to grow and had an offense that really worked with him. I feel bad for Trubisky, and hopefully he can succeed and try to make it work, or is he just lost some motivation to continue, and is he just going to be a career backup? That is for the future to decide, and I thank you all for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you're ready for any other videos. Have a good one.